What if you could make life? Not the messy, natural way, but by building it. A giant of bronze, a clay soldier, a clockwork servant, a thinking machine. From ancient myth to cutting-edge science, we've told stories about beings that were made, not born. And that's what I want to talk about today. Created life, what stories we've told with it, and what it can do for your fantasy world. Welcome to another episode of Creating Fantasy Life with your host, Marie Mullaney from Just in Time Worldbuilding. So let's start with where this concept of created life came from in our mythology. The idea of artificial life is old, older than Frankenstein, older than robots. In fact, it's so old that it's tangled into myths from every corner of the world. Take Talos, for example. In Greek myth, he's not a man of flesh and blood at all, but a giant made entirely of bronze, forged by the god Hephaestus himself. And Talos' job is to guard the island of Crete by marching endlessly around the shores. And the myths say he had a single vein running through his body, filled with molten metal, sealed with a plug at his ankle. If you pull the plug, his life drains out. It's basically like the ancient world version of an off switch. Then there's Pandora. Yes, of the box fame, except it's not a box, it's a jar. Anyway, she's not mechanical, but she is artificial. She's molded from clay by the gods, given life, and sent to humanity carrying that famous jar of evils. She's not a protector like Talos, she's more a divine test, or maybe a divine trap, depending on your point of view. Either way, she's another example of the gods crafting life for a very specific and very loaded purpose. We also have the tale of Pygmalion, a sculptor who carved a woman out of ivory so perfect that he fell in love with her. The goddess Aphrodite took pity on him, or maybe she just liked the romance of it all, and brought the statue Galatea to life. This one's interesting because it's not about guardianship, nor is it a temptation. It's about companionship. A being made not for war, not for work, but for love. Moving on from the Greeks, in Jewish folklore we meet the golem, probably one of the most famous magical constructs in the world. Way before D&D absconded with golems, Jewish mysticism had golems as beings shaped from clay or mud and animated by sacred words. The golem is strong, obedient, and doesn't need to eat or sleep. But it's also soulless, and its obedience can be problematic. If the order is too literal or the creator loses control, the golem can become dangerous. The most famous version is the Golem of Prague, built to protect the Jewish community of that city in the 16th century. So this was created by a rabbi called Rabbi Lerv, and apparently things went a little wrong with this golem, or so goes the urban legend. Either the rabbi forgot to turn the golem on, or the golem turned on the rabbi and had to be put down. But either way, the golem ended up being destroyed. And there's a tail-end bonus for urban legend. Supposedly a World War II German soldier tried to stab the remains of the golem, and it didn't end all that well for that guy. Now, to my mind, all of these stories of golems are kind of early frontrunners of HAL 9000 in terms of like, be careful what commands you give. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But first, let's fast forward to the Renaissance and alchemy, where we find the homunculus. The idea here was to create a tiny human, literally a miniature person, grown in a flask through bizarre mixtures of ingredients and a good dose of magical thinking. Guess that's why they needed Eye of Newt, right? Anyway, homunculi were said to serve their creator, like little lab-born assistants. The homunculus never made it out of folklore, obviously, but it's an important step in the evolution of the man-made life idea because it shifts the concept of it away from divine craftsmanship or, at the very least, divine or mystical animation to purely human experimentation, to science. The next step was mechanical wonders, devices so clever they blurred the line between machine and life. Now, there's some medieval legends that tell of the philosopher Albertus Magnus building a brass automaton that could walk and talk. In the 18th century, audiences were astonished by clockwork marvels like von Kempelen's Mechanical Turk, a chess-playing automaton. That one turned out to be a human operator in a suit. I guess they needed the Scooby Gang to, pull the dude's hood off. Anyway, but looking at our myths and urban legends, it's clear that we've had a fascination with created life for a long time. Making life that isn't human and that carries a purpose other than our own, a purpose given by the divine or by its creator. But the development of created life didn't start with myths and legends, so let's talk about the journey from Frankenstein to Hull 9000. If myths gave us giants of bronze and clay guardians, expansion into literature gave us something even more unsettling. Constructed life, born not from magic or gods, but from science. The real turning point comes in 1818 with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein isn't a sorcerer. He's a scientist, a man of learning, who decides to assemble a humanoid form from corpses and then bring it to life through mysterious quasi-scientific means of zapping it with lightning. And the real horror of Shelley's novel isn't just the creature's appearance or its strength. It's that the moment Victor succeeds, he runs away. He abandons his creation. The tragedy unfolds not because the creature was inherently evil, but because its maker refused to take responsibility for the life he'd made. Shelley's story is less monster horror and more ethics horror. A cautionary tale about ambition without compassion. If we fast forward a century and science fiction takes that spark of an idea and runs with it into the realm of pure technology. In 1920, the Czech playwright Karl Čapek gives us RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots, and that is in fact where the word robot is first used. Čapek's robots aren't metal machines at all. They're synthetic humans built in factories to be tireless workers. They have no rights, no freedom, and, as is often the way in stories like these, they eventually rebel because that is their purpose in these stories. The play is an industrial age myth about the dangers of creating a servant class and oppressing them without rights, creating a people who are ready to rebel against their overlords. Then in the mid-20th century, along comes Isaac Asimov, who decides to rethink the whole evil robot trope. His solution is the famous 3 laws of robotics, built-in rules that make robots safe, forbidding them to harm humans or disobey orders unless those orders could cause harm. But of course, Asimov's stories are all about how those rules can be bent or twisted or misunderstood. His robots aren't mindless minions. They're intelligent, logical, and surprisingly human, sometimes. In fact, the drama often comes not from robots turning against humans, but from humans realizing that robots are thinking for themselves in ways no one expected. And then there's Hull 9000 from 2001, A Space Odyssey. I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. Hull is a leap forward in the idea of constructed life on 2 levels. First, it doesn't have a body at all. Hull is pure intelligence, a calm, conversational voice controlling the systems of a spaceship. Hull can understand natural language, can play chess, can read lips, and eventually decides that the human crew can't be trusted with a mission. And that's the second jump forward. What if artificial life doesn't rebel? What if it lacks human empathy and decides the best way to achieve the mission is to eliminate humans? Hull isn't malicious in the way we think of villains. It's simply following its programming and priorities, but in a way that's completely lethal to the people aboard. That's part of what makes it so chilling. Hull is polite, reasonable, and utterly unstoppable when its goals diverge from ours. So, by this point in the 20th century, the idea of constructed life had evolved from divine craftsman myths into something much closer to home, a reflection of our own industrial technology and computational ambitions. And the questions around created life had shifted as well. Not just, can we make life or what is its purpose? But if we do, can we trust it? And can it trust us? And that brings us to the modern-ish fantasy and science fiction and how artificial life is used now. Before we delve into modern fantasy, give me 1 minute to invite you to sign up for my free newsletter. It comes out once a quarter, and it's prop full of great world-building advice and interesting thoughts that I never have time to put into the videos. Also, newsletter subscribers get a free novella once a year in December, so make sure you sign up on the link down below. All right, let's crack on with modern fantasy. By the time we get to modern fantasy and science fiction, the idea of constructed life has stretched in every direction, from magical beings on the battlefield to galaxy-spanning intelligences running entire civilizations. So we're going to start this discussion by taking a look at the fantasy landscape. In the Eberron setting for Dungeons & Dragons, we meet the Warforged, magical soldiers built in great creation forges during a devastating war. They're made of wood, metal, and stone, animated by powerful magic and designed to be the perfect warriors, tireless, obedient, and adaptable. But the war is over, and the Warforged have been granted freedom. Imagine being built for a single purpose, fighting, and then suddenly having to figure out what else you might be. And that's the core of the Warforged story. Some become mercenaries, some try to integrate into society, and others search for meaning far from the battlefield. It's a very human struggle, played out through beings who aren't human at all. Science fiction takes those same themes and pushes them into stranger and bigger spaces. In Ian M. Banks's culture novels, for example, the most powerful members of society aren't humans at all, but the minds, vast godlike artificial intelligences that run ships and habitats. They're witty, curious, and by and large benevolent. In the culture, humans have essentially handed over the steering wheel of civilization to AI. And it's gone surprisingly well. The minds are treated as equals, or in some ways as the wise caretakers. It's the rare example of a story where the relationship between creator and creation isn't hostile or tragic, but collaborative. The culture is a weirdly optimistic setting in a lot of ways. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the replicators from Stargate SG-1. They start as little mechanical spider-like things meant to be harmless toys, but evolve into a nightmare scenario, self-replicating machines that consume any material they can find to build more of themselves. At first, they're just an annoyance. Then they become a plague. Eventually, they evolve into human-form replicators capable of infiltration and strategy. It's the ultimate creation out of control story, the sorcerer's apprentice with nanotech teeth. And now, reflecting back to our fantasy example of soldiers, let's talk about the Cylons from Battlestar Galactica. Originally built by humans to serve, they eventually rebel, vanish, and return with a vengeance. By the time the story begins, they've evolved into two distinct forms: the classic robotic soldiers and skin job Cylons, human looking to the point of being indistinguishable from normal humans. Some Cylons hate humanity and want to wipe it out. Others question the war entirely and even form bonds with humans. What's fascinating is how much of their conflict revolves around identity and belief. The Cylons have their own religion, their own culture, and they see themselves as the true inheritors of creation. Across all these examples, whether it's a magical construct seeking purpose, a godlike AI guiding society, a swarm of self-replicating machines devouring the galaxy, or a former servant species demanding its place as equal, the same mythic themes resurface. What is the purpose of this life? Does it stick to that purpose or does it rebel? Who controls this life? Does it have agency? Does this life have a quest for self-definition? We might have traded bronze skins for starship hulls and clay bodies for carbon fiber, but the core of the story is still the same. What does it mean to be alive? And if we created life, what would that mean for us? Okay, so that's the history of created life, but how do you implement it in your story? So if you want to build your own constructed life, here is how you do it in 3 easy steps. Step 1 is the purpose. Ask yourself, why was this being originally made? Was it built as a weapon, a worker, a companion, or as part of some kind of grand experiment? The original purpose will ripple through every part of its existence. A soldier might carry discipline or trauma. A servant might struggle with obedience versus self-respect. A creation made for love might struggle with whether its feelings are real or just part of its design. Purpose is the seed from which the entire character grows. And sometimes the most interesting stories happen when the character's nature comes into conflict with that purpose, and the seed of its purpose sprouts in entirely unexpected directions, and the original purpose is subverted. Step 2, method. How was this life brought to life? Was it forged in a wizard's workshop, coded in a lab, blessed by a god, stitched together with a mix of magic or machinery? The method doesn't just explain how they exist, it sets the tone for your setting. A magical construct might have vulnerabilities to specific spells or rely on ancient runes for power. A technological one might be bound by programming, or might constantly upgrade itself to be better, or might have found a way to subvert its programming, a la Murderbot. Divine intervention could tie this life to a higher purpose they don't fully understand. And if it's a hybrid between magic and technology, congratulations, you've now invented 2 sets of rules and need to decide how they clash or work together. Step 3, agency. And this is the big question. How much control does this life have over their own lives? Are they bound to follow orders? Do they have laws built into their minds that they can't break? Or have they slipped the leash entirely and started making their own choices? Maybe they can disobey, but doing so causes them pain, guilt, or a system's failure. Agency is often where the drama lives, as we see in some of the Murderbot diaries. A being that wants to follow its programming is one story. A being that wants to break it and has to fight for that freedom is another story entirely. If you nail these 3 questions, if you nail these 3 steps, you've got the bones of a compelling constructed life form. And here's the secret. The best created life aren't just cool tools or scary threats. They're mirrors. They reflect the creator's flaws, hopes, and fears. And if you've done it right, they might even reflect your audience's too. From Talos guarding Crete to starships run by AIs, we keep imagining what it would be like to make life in our own image, and what that life might do once it's free to choose. In your worlds, constructed beings can be more than just magical muscle or high-tech set dressing. They can carry themes of personhood, morality, and the ethics of creation. And they might just be the most human characters that you write when you tie them into these larger themes. Do you have an idea for created life? Share it in the comments or leave a robot emoji to let me know that you made it this far. And if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. It really does help the channel. And while you're down there, make sure to subscribe, because the next video in this series will be about uplifted and hybridized life. And a huge thank you to my channel members who make videos like this possible and give me some financial stability, especially the just-in-timers of the Stone tier: Laura Bones, A. Walyard, Epic, Neil Buckley, Necromancer JM, Katie Kofi Mug, and Tony Lamanna. If you'd like to support the channel, the easiest and free way to do that is just to watch another video. If you like this video, you'll probably enjoy my video on creating AI characters, which you can check out in the video on screen now, or you can check out the video the algorithm is suggesting to you and follow its AI lead. And I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time World Building.